We'll do, all right, we'll do record. So we're live and I'm gonna do share screen. And we're gonna start by talking a little bit about outlines of Pyrrhonism by Sextus Empiricus, right, Vladimir?
Mm-hmm. So let's just read the first paragraph, just slowly, sentence after sentence, and talk about, like, first you may read the paragraph, and then we may go through it just sentence after sentence, trying to figure out what's written here.
All right, so I can read this first point here. The main difference between the philosophies: when people search for something, the likely outcome is that either they find it, or not finding it, they accept that it cannot be found, or they continue to search. So, also in the case of what is sought in philosophy, I think some people have claimed to have found the truth. Others have asserted that it cannot be apprehended, and others are still searching. Those who think that they have found it are the dogmatists, properly so called, for example, the followers of Aristotle and Epicurus, the Stoics, and certain others. The followers of Cleitomachus and Carneades, as well as other academics, have asserted that it cannot be apprehended. The skeptics continue to search. Hence, it is with reason that the main types of philosophy are thought to be three in number: the dogmatic, the academic, and the skeptic. Concerning the first two, it'll best become others to speak. But concerning the skeptic way, we shall now give an outline account, stating in advance that as regards none of the things that we are about to say do we firmly maintain that matters are absolutely as stated, but in each instance we are simply reporting, like a chronicler, what now appears to us to be the case.
So, okay, now I guess we may just talk about it for half an hour, trying to figure out the differences between dogmatic, academic, and skeptic philosophers.
Okay. Well, this is a little bit new to me. I don't think I've ever studied skepticism before, but so have you read this book before?
Yeah, I've read it a couple of times in 2015.
And it's something that has made quite an impression on you.
Yeah, it's dull philosophy. I mean, it's not exciting. You will not find some style like Nietzsche here, but the it's like reading Kant. So it's very profound. You read and you begin to understand certain things which you couldn't understand before. And here, which I would say that the main impression which I had after reading this book, that everything I read before, so like in philosophy, I couldn't understand. Like there were so many philosophers who were kind of skeptics, and I couldn't understand what skepticism meant. And after reading Sextus Empiricus, I got it, and I just, wow, that's so amazing. So I could understand like some arguments between Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Hegel, whatever, Hobbes, John Locke, David Hume, Descartes, Spinoza. So it all became clear after reading this book. And this division on dogmatic, academic, and skeptics, for example, Kant, it's kind of academic here. So since he like agnostic, it's modern agnosticism. So they called before like this academic philosophy. And dogmatic philosophy, it's basically 90% of philosophies where people say this is truth, like Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, whatever, Feuerbach, Schopenhauer, like Will. And the skeptics is those who just study different philosophers and try to not identify themselves with any of them, but try to understand what's really going on, and without being attached to any particular philosophy.
Okay. All right. So do you consider yourself, in this case, do you consider yourself a dogmatist or an academic, or a skeptic?
No, I'm closer to the skeptic.
To the skeptic.
Yeah, like after I read this in Sextus Empiricus at 2015, I basically was like on this, like whatever was whatever philosophy I was reading, I was looking at it from skeptical view.
Skeptical lens.
Yeah, and even determinism. I mean, before, like for 3 years, I was highly influenced by Schopenhauer and was thinking that determinism is the highest truth, let's say. But after reading Sextus Empiricus, I realized that it may be true, but maybe not. I don't know. Skepticism just gave me another perspective to look at the determinism.
So it's this position that you always have to be sort of doubting that it's true, right?
Yeah, it's basically Socratic. I don't know, so I know that I don't know. And Socrates, I guess Sextus Empiricus will mention him many times. Like he was actually the founder of this. Like in some sense, he was the founder of this skepticism. Actually, there was another guy named Pyrrha, and he was a contemporary of Socrates. But I guess Socrates influenced him in many ways. So when you say that, like you know something, but you don't claim that this is the absolute truth. It just since whatever you know is just the way how you experience something, the way how you get knowledge, but it doesn't mean that it's only the one case. So what do you think about like this division? Like,
well, I think it's an interesting division. I mean, I had never really thought about it on those terms, but I think it's it's an interesting way of introducing the topic of philosophy, and I'm excited to see what he comes up with next.
So let's try to let's try to speculate on what's gonna follow. Like just try to imagine what as I said, I was reading the last time I was reading this book, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. So I only remember some basics, but in details,
right,
it would be hard for me. Like I remember the main arguments was like there's certain philosophy and they claim something is true. So if and you may claim that something opposite is true, and there are certain arguments and they all defend their theses by giving some reasons, and you may give the opposite reasons to your thesis, and it all depends on the criteria which you use to assert what is true and what is not. And to come up with a criteria, you have to have proof that this is a sufficient criteria. But to have proof that this is a sufficient criteria, you have to, have a criteria for proving. Like, and it just goes on and on. So basically, you have a criteria, you have a proof, you have another criteria, you have another proof, and all these philosophies and dogmatic, philosophies, they may be built in themselves. They may not have contradictions, but when you look at them from a different side, from the side of another philosophy, you may easily find something that contradicts. It's like in mathematics, there's famous Gödel theorem that any logical system, like it may be math, language, whatever. So it always contains contradiction, which is unsolvable for this system. Okay. I'm not sure that I say exactly what, but I can understand the idea. So here's you can always find the contradiction within the system, well, outside the system, but within the system it may be completely sound and valid.
Right. Yeah. So this book it seems that it's going to focus more on sort of like an epistemological differences, perhaps. I don't know. So I imagine it's going to go that way. But on the other hand, this might be just an introduction, and he's trying to distinguish himself from the other philosophers and providing a new spin, on it. So it might be just the introduction, and then he'll go on to talk about a number of different things.
And see, in the end of the paragraph, he says like, "I just report what I know, but I'm not claim that this is true." So since you may also blame, like not blame, you may blame skeptics saying that if you say that nothing is true, it's also a kind of assertion. So you say something, and this is also kind of philosophy. It's also kind of dogma, and they say no. So we disagree, since whatever we say, we are reporting what we know at this moment, but we don't claim that it's absolute truth.
Right. He's not trying to establish something that is an absolute truth. He's never gonna. So I guess he's never gonna say he's found the truth. He's just saying, well, this is what I think it might be the truth, right?
Yeah,
so
and what's even more important, is not that this is what I think is true. This is how I know that. So this, like, he explains how he knows that, but he doesn't say that this is the only way to get to this knowledge. So maybe there's another way to get to the same knowledge, but this way may, you may come up with a different conclusion, or you may come up with a different philosophy, different dogma.
It's sort of the way I usually tend to think about things. So I mean, yeah, it might not be so strange to me after all.
Let's try to take some philosophers and put them in different categories, like some modern philosophers, or philosophers of modern, like of enlightened era, whatever.
Well, I mean, the ones that I know, I mean, I usually tend to see them and to read philosophy more in the sense of the what does he call it again? The dogmatic. I see it more in that way. They are trying to come up with a theory of things, and you either agree with them or not. But that's usually how I take it. In fact, he mentions Aristotle, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say most philosophers, from my understanding, tend to fall in this dogmatic category, as he seems to state it here in the first paragraph.
Would Bertrand Russell be considered as dogmatist?
Well, according to this paragraph, yes, because I mean, the way he writes is trying to assert a truth. It might not necessarily be the ultimate truth, but I mean, he says that's what he believes is right. Yeah. So as far as I can remember. It's difficult for anyone to speak. If you're going to write a book about something, usually you are trying to transmit the notion that you know something, or else you wouldn't. I guess you wouldn't be writing a book about it, right?
Yeah, I guess Descartes is the famous example of.
Yeah, Descartes, I guess, is an example of. That's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah, but he starts like a skeptic, but then he still tries to say that there's something that I know, like thinking, for example. Yeah, I think, therefore I am.
True.
And then thinking becomes dogma, and then there's dualism and division between mind and body. So it's like you start like a skeptic, but you can't actually maintain it for a long. Since if you want to say something, there's some kind of truth in what you're saying. Otherwise, you wouldn't say anything. But we may just check and see how Sextus Empiricus will. There's a long book. I mean, there's a few hundred pages. And he's gonna insert in a very good, like as I said, it's not funny. I mean, the style is kind of academic, but just analyzing it beat after beat, it may be really exciting. Like when we just talk about it, when we try to understand it and attach it to our personal experience, to maybe a real world, what's going on now in philosophy,
right?
In science as well.
Yeah, maybe we can read the second.
Paragraph. Let's do that.
All right. Let's see. So the accounts of skepticism. One account of the skeptic philosophy is called general, the other is specific. In the general account, we set forth the
wait for a moment. Let's consider this sentence. I really like this general and specific. Does something comes to your mind, like general, specific, the difference? No, physics. Think about physics.
I mean, physics is. I don't know yet what he means by it, but
general theory of relativity, specific theory of relativity.
Okay.
Einstein.
So what's your understanding then?
Well, I guess it may have some connections with Einstein theories of this general theory of relativity and specific theory of relativity there. And relativity itself is like kind of skepticism. So if you take the word relative, so it basically means there's nothing is absolute. But then there's a distinction between philosophy. Skeptic philosophy is called the general and other like specific. So in Einstein, it's also like one theory is specific, and it's about light and speed of light, and what was it also like about time. And the general theory is more about gravity and time space. Right.
Let's see what he means by this. In the general account, we set forth the characteristics, traits of skepticism, stating its basic idea, its origins, arguments, criterion, and goal, as well as the modes of epoche, which means suspension of judgment, and how we take the skeptic statements and the distinction between skepticism and the competing philosophies. In the specific account, we state objections to each part of so-called philosophy. Let us then first take up the general account, beginning the exposition with the various terms for the skeptic way. All right.
So, okay, the first general is about like this body of knowledge, what is skepticism and how it presents itself and how it differentiates itself from other philosophers, right? And the skeptic, the specific philosophy is about objections.
It seems that way. It seems that that the specific part will be basically a critique of specific philosophies or specific philosophical arguments, and the general is just talking about skepticism in general and how it distinguishes itself from other types of philosophy. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So let's go on.
Okay. The nomenclature of the skeptic way. The skeptic way is called zetetic, questioning, from its activity in questioning and inquiring. Emphatic, suspensive, from the pathos that arises concerning the subject of inquiry. Aporetic, inclined to aporia, either, as some say, from its being puzzled and questioning about everything, or from its being at a loss as to whether to assent or dissent. And Pyrrhonian, because it appears to us that Pyrrho applied himself to skepticism more vigorously and conspicuously than his predecessors did.
Yeah, I guess we may just pass these, terms. It's not important for us now, right? So not going to memorize them and use them. Just
sure. I mean, I think perhaps more important is what skepticism is.
Yeah, exactly.
The skeptic way is a disposition to oppose phenomena and noumena to one another in any way whatever, with the result that, owing to the equivalence among the things and statements thus opposed, we are brought first to epoche and then to ataraxia. We do not apply the term disposition in any subtle sense, but simply as cognate with to be disposed. At this point, we are taking as phenomena the objects of sense perception, thus contrasting them with the noumena. The phrase in any way, whatever, can modify both the word disposition so as to make us take that word in a plain sense, as we did, and the phrase to oppose phenomena and noumena. For since we oppose these in various ways, phenomena to phenomena, noumena to noumena, or alternando phenomena to noumena, we say in any way, whatever, in order to include all such oppositions. Or we can apply in any way, whatever, to phenomena and noumena, in order that we may not have to inquire how the phenomena appear or the noumena are thought, but may take these terms in their plain senses. By opposed statements, we simply mean consistent ones, not necessarily affirmative and negative. By equipollence, we mean equality as regards credibility and the lack of it. That is, that no one of the inconsistent statements takes precedence over any other as being more credible. And epoche is a state of the intellect on account of which we neither deny nor affirm anything. And ataraxia is an untroubled and tranquil condition of the soul. In our remarks on the goal of skepticism, we shall come back to the question of how ataraxia enters the soul along with epoche.
Okay, let's go slowly now. We would like to slow down and just read one sentence, and we will just talk about it, try to understand what it means.
Sure.
In these terms like ataraxia and epoche, yeah, they're like ataraxia. It's also, I guess, it's a term from Stoic philosophy, which basically means that you kind of understand what's going on and you live with accordance, like with harmony, in harmony with the reality.
Yeah, it says here it is an untroubled and tranquil condition of the soul. So yeah, so it sounds a little bit like a nirvana, like the Buddhist concept of nirvana.
Yeah.
When you are,
but when nirvana, there's nothing at all. But here you're still.
Oh yes, I'm just saying it kind of well, it's similar to nirvana in the sense that that's the state that you're trying to acquire, that you're trying to get to.
Ideal state.
Yeah, the ideal state, exactly.
Which you're gonna reach.
So I guess it's the ideal state of a philosopher, the way they see it, this untroubled condition of the soul when you basically when you figured it out.
Yeah, and also this, this notion of suspension of judgment, like when you're always kind of conscious of your speech and whatever you say, you don't assert anything, you don't claim that this or that is true. You just try to report what you know, how you know that, but you not try to, say that this is the only thing, this is the only correct thing. And it's kind of skill also. I mean,
this reminds me of something that David sent me. Well, a quote that someone sent me not so long ago. So it's basically, what was it? Well, it was Bertrand Russell's quote. Actually, you asked about Bertrand Russell. He's one of my favorites. Well, he's quite popular with the philosophers in general, I guess. So it was something like, the problem with the world is, or the trouble with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so sure of themselves, whereas wiser people always have doubts. So it was something to that extent. I don't think I said the exact words, but that's the idea of the quote.
Yeah, to rephrase that, you like when you know something, you still have doubts, right? And
yes, it comes down to that, I guess. Yeah,
and if you're an expert, if you understand that you don't understand everything, whereas when you know a little bit, right, you just claim that you know everything and you're completely sure that whatever you say is right. Just
True.
you never discovered actually anything like which may provoke you to think otherwise.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about knowledge is that yeah, I guess because when you do get to a point that you start to understand more things, I mean you naturally understand how stupid you are, that because there's a lot to learn, and it's how, well, not stupid, but you understand
Limited.
that there's a lot
Yeah.
more, you
Yeah.
understand that there's a lot. If you don't understand there's a lot more, you're stupid. Because there certainly is a lot more. But if you haven't really discovered that, like you think, well, I know a lot, but
Mhm.
but when you actually start to study things, there's a lot. Even if you know a lot, there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah, it's also, I was doing this stream today as well, like studying stream, and I was thinking about this dichotomy between materialism and spiritualism, and on the other side, like idealism and realism. And it seems that you can't fully understand neither of these oppositions unless you study both of them. And it's very hard to study both of them since if you just study in depth one of them, you develop kind of disgust to the opposite one. So and you tend to take a position and say, "Oh, this is probably true," especially if you dedicate a lot of time and energy to studying. It's very hard then to get on the opposite pole and take seriously everything what people are saying there. It's almost like studying two languages. So it's like, for example, this hard material science and spiritualism. So they can't understand each other since they are talking in two different languages, and they prefer to use only their language and reject the language of the other side. But to understand it fully, when you know both, you kind of on this in state of ataraxia. So you understand like they both are just the part of what's going on, and yeah, it sounds very where when you try to pretend that then this is the truth and the other side is just ignorant, you basically don't understand the other side.
Yeah, and just go back to this ataraxia thing. It seems that he's stating that before the ataraxia, you have to come to epoche, which is a state of the intellect on account of which you can neither deny nor affirm anything. So it's the skeptical way, right? You can't ultimately, you can't really deny something or say that something is right.
The translation, but it's like misleading translation for epoche is apathy.
Mm-hmm.
So the literal translation of epoche will be apathy.
Right.
But apathy, it's kind of misleading since you think, apathy is something negative. You're just in a state when you, kind of depression or whatever. But for skepticism, epoche, it means that you basically don't care about like. But it's not about not caring about anything. It's just there are some people who claim this is true. There are some people who claim that is true, and you are not attached to each of these sides. You try to create a big picture, and you never stop searching for some other ways of looking at at reality, at truth, and whatever is here.
Yeah. And then we can even read, this one is very short. It talks about the skeptic. The definition of the Pyrrhonian philosopher is implicitly contained in that of the skeptic way. He is the person who has the aforementioned disposition. So he's really just reinforcing what he just said, right?
Yeah.
The skeptic is the one that has the epoche disposition, that he's not willing to deny or affirm things. He's trying to sort of navigate between the waters and try to chronicle things.
Yeah,
But
understood.
he's not trying to create dogma. I guess that's his point. That the dogma is solidified, not solidified, solidified knowledge. You come up with a theory, and then there you go. That's you kind of like you give birth to this theory, right? This is my baby theory,
Yeah, and then people
but he doesn't want to give birth to any theories, he just wants to kind of like look at things and assess if they seem reasonable or not, I guess.
Yeah, and the problem, I guess, with that is that if you give birth to a certain fear, some people who will use this fear, they probably will not understand it as you understand it. So they may misinterpret it. And, it's like with all sorts of religions or science. So people invent something, they try to, try to use it as a way to improve things. But then after a few, 3 generations, it just gets corrupted and we have all sorts of negative consequences.
Yeah, I mean, Nietzsche is an example of that. It was appropriated by the Nazis, and it was certainly not what he intended. I'm sure. So it is true that when you come up with a theory, it can be bastardized.
Now, it's also very hard to resist this, especially when you're studying something, you see that you really understood something that nobody else understands, and I want to just explain it to everybody, and then you come up with some ideas and theses, you try to prove that this is true, and then like how to resist it if you really invent something like in this intellectual field.
Yeah, I mean, it's the natural tendency that we have as people, right? We understand something and then we want to create some sort of system out of it. And that's what a theory is. But the word that he seems to use for theory is dogma, which is usually a word that we use in a negative way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is the intention or not.
Well, perhaps in this time, dogma had a different meaning.
Well, that's sort of what I mean, because also we have to deal with the fact that there is not only the time period, this is 2,000 years ago, but not only that, it's also a different language.
Yeah.
So whatever language it is actually that you read this in, it's always going to be a translation. So, and it's probably not only that, it's probably a translation of a translation, because most translations of Greek, I believe, didn't really come from Greek. They came from Arabic in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, and in fact, it might be a translation of a translation of a translation, because a lot of the texts went from Greek to Arabic to Latin, and then to another language. Yeah. So it's there's probably 2 translations before the last translation, the final translation.
Yeah, I guess it would be fun to read in original these outlines of Pernian. But still, like I guess our idea not to there's something behind the words, and probably like we may understand at least to some degree what actually was there, like by analyzing words and trying to compare how people perceived things then and how we perceive them now. So language is just a tool which provides us with an ability to understand what stays behind the language.
Well,
some real phenomenon.
What he does here, though, and this is kind of a general. I'm thinking, this may be a general lesson for philosophers and for people that are writing essays in general. He not only does he state things, but he defines them. So it's hard to actually misunderstand what he's saying, because he does go out of his way to explain what he's saying. He doesn't just say ataraxia. No, he explains what ataraxia is. It's not
and gives some examples, which is
and he gives examples,
very important for understanding.
Yeah. So this severely limits the misunderstanding that comes from translations.
I think we may go on and read this Origins of Skepticism. The 6th paragraph.
So the origins of skepticism. We say that the causal origin of the skeptic way is the hope of attaining ataraxia. So so what he's saying here is that the goal is ataraxia, like we said before.
Mm-hmm.
certain talented people, upset by anomaly in the facts and at a loss as to which of these facts deserve assent, endeavor to discover what is true in them and what is false, expecting that by settling this they would achieve ataraxia. But the main origin of skepticism is the practice of opposing to each statement an equal statement. It seems to us that doing this brings an end to dogmatizing.
So you have a theory, right? Like you learn some Platonism, and then you look for another theory which is going to be equal, but it's going to oppose Platonism. And then you understand both theories, and you see how insufficient they both are, like from like kind of third point of view.
Yes. So he is saying that Plato and Aristotle, the normal philosophers, dogmatize. And I guess the next point would be, does the skeptic dogmatize? Which I'm guessing he's going to say no.
Yeah.
Or this whole thing probably would be kind of pointless.
Yeah, I'd like to get slower. Like certain talented people upset by anomaly in the facts, and at the loss as to which of these facts deserve assent, endeavor to discover what is true in them and what is false. It's not about, it's like there are some certain facts like science, let's say. So it says that X is truth, X is true, and for a skeptic, it's like, okay, X is true, and you look for something to say X is not true.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, but what kind of examples? Like, if I say that sun, for example, like Earth revolves around the sun, it's kind of knowledge, right? So I state something, and this is based on certain experience, which we may all see, like which we may all confirm. And for skepticism, it's still it's also a dogma.
Right. But that, yeah, I don't know how he would deal with something like that, which is fairly difficult to dispute. But
yeah, let's suppose that we state an opposite, like something opposite that.
Well, I mean, it's not so. It used to be crazy to say something like that. Well, it's still crazy, but there's actually people on YouTube saying that things like the Earth is flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously untrue. However, these people are very stupid, and also they obviously have trouble reasoning, but it's yeah, I guess it's proof that you can dispute facts that are undisputable, right? You can dispute facts that are undisputed. You can do anything, but I think that,
I guess, more about the interpretation of the facts rather than like certain facts. The facts, just I guess in Sextus Empiricus time there was also certain facts which nobody disputed, like who was saying. But it's not his point to say that,
I think he's talking more about things that are a little bit more disputable. So a lot of the things that Plato deals with, for example, are not, is the Earth flat or not?
It's about ideas, right?
It's about ideas, right? So is there an absolute idea, like the idea of horse? Is there a perfect horse that then originates all the horses that we see and touch? But are there absolute ideas that inspire objects, right? The idea
like what is love, right? Or what is justice? And Plato,
those are other things that he explores. What is justice is the object of the Republic, the main question. So what is justice? And then Socrates goes to, he asks people, what is justice? And they say, well, justice is this. And he said, well, but if justice is this, how do you explain this? And then he proceeds to refute that hypothesis, right? So this is the method of the dogmatic, according to this to Sextus Empiricus, right? But he's saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to oppose different ideas instead of trying to refute them. I guess I don't know, that's what I understood.
Yeah, I guess it's like you may refute, but it's not just about refuting. It's about seeing like these opposite sides. So if you say justice is this, and there's somebody else who says no, it may be something else. And there's like several like competing theories of justice. You not try to confirm one theory, but you try to kind of acknowledge both or understand both, and say that there's several ways of looking at this problem. And I'm not gonna. It's like in politics, right? So when we have lefts and rights, and if I ask like, who are you? Like, are you left or are you right? And you may be like, sometimes you may be like, you may prefer something related to left. Sometimes you may prefer something related to right. It's very hard to identify that. Today you may be right. Tomorrow something may influence you. You may become left. And say, no, I am right. And when you as soon as you say I am right or I am left, you kind of you limit your perception, you limit your vision, and you try to interpret everything from this one point of view.
So you're creating the dogma, and then everything else will come from this dogma.
You categorize the world in a certain way, and then you reject everything what doesn't fit to your reality. And Sextus Empiricus, basically this idea is like, okay, I'm gonna see like both, but I'm not gonna attach to any of them, or 3 or 5 or how many theories there are.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, it does seem that that's what he's saying. Yeah, instead of creating a dogma, instead of creating a position, I'm just not even going to take a position. I'm just going to look at the different positions that one might take.
It's more about, so you don't identify yourself with the position. You say, maybe now, like for example, now you may say, I prefer left and I'm on the left side, but it's just my current position, and this is because A, B, C, D, and you give some reasons, right? But probably in future things are going to be changed. Probably something else will happen, and you become like you'll prefer another position. So he doesn't want to make you believe in one thing and then interpret everything through.
Yeah, he doesn't want to marry any ideas, right?
Yeah.
He wants to stay a bachelor. Bachelor philosophy indefinitely, and just like flirt with different ideas when it's convenient.
Yeah, as I said, this week I started working on this studying stream and studying this book Beyond Good and Evil. And it actually starts like the preface. I'm just going to read it to you since I remember it. Like, supposing that truth is a woman, what then? Is there no ground for suspecting that all philosophers, insofar as they have been dogmatists, have failed to understand women? The terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity with which they have paid their addresses to truth have been only unskillful and unseemly methods for winning a woman. Certainly, she has never allowed herself to be won, and at present, every kind of dogma stands with sad and discouraged mien, if indeed it stands at all, for there are scoffers who maintain that it has fallen, that all dogma lies on the ground, nay more, that it is at its last gasp. And then he goes on and talks about like dogmatizing philosophy. But this comparison, truth and women, or philosophy or women, is kind of common among philosophers. So when you say like Sextus Empiricus doesn't want to marry a certain dogma, it's like it sounds very Nietzschean.
Yeah, man, it's a good. I guess it's a good analogy. It makes sense. It makes some sense. Oh boy. No, this is interesting. It's interesting to explore this book, this philosophy.
Yeah, I think we may just bring more experience. Like, what I'm doing in my studying streams, I'm trying to just take one paragraph or one sentence and just force myself to think about it more, to find some reference points in my experience and just say, okay, like this idea, like for example, the skepticism, right? So there's certain, like it's not only about philosophy. So it may help you to understand your relationship with people. It may help you to understand your attachment to particular views. And so you may just look for examples and find something relevant and use it as a way to understand in depth the concept, the ideas.
Yeah, I mean, next week we can keep reading it and keep exploring these ideas of skepticism.
And that's
Uh,
very good way of studying. I mean, when you just go slowly, you don't read fast. Just try to.
yeah, I like it. I like it because you're reading, you're learning, but at the same time you're dissecting these ideas and trying to understand them better. So it's yeah, it's a cool exercise.
Mhm.
Are there so are there any other things that are on your mind, maybe last week's discussion that you had, or this week's upcoming discussion? What are you going to talk about
It's still
this week?
consciousness. It's still consciousness.
Consciousness still?
Yeah.
I thought you changed it every week.
Well, I decided to like prolong it for a few weeks. Actually, the last week we were at we went to the nature, to the forest,
Oh,
to
really?
a picnic, and
Wow, that's
we
nice.
did yeah, we didn't talk about anything in particular. Just had barbecue.
Just chill.
Yeah, and yeah, and this week we're going to continue talking about consciousness. But I'm like I stopped like thinking about. I started working on this book, like Beyond Good and Evil, and most of my thoughts now are in this book. So I'm thinking more. I'm not thinking about the speaking club. I'm thinking more how I'm going to do with this book.
Beyond Good and Evil. Well, I would actually like to read Beyond Good and Evil with you. So maybe we can do two books instead of
Yeah,
just one.
sure. Why not?
Why
Why
not?
not?
Because I've always wanted to read it,
Mhm.
and I've never actually read the actual book. So
So much. We might start from this sex empiricus one to see how far we can go, unless we exhaust ourselves, and then probably
sure,
should.
okay. Well, Beyond Good and Evil can be the next one
since
after it.
since Beyond Good and Evil and this one, they're quite similar. I mean, like even the beginning almost like not the same, but Nietzsche certainly he was very keen at skepticism, so he knew
Mhm.
sex empiricus quite well, and he knew like all these Asian philosophies and like he, but the difference in the style, of course, is if Sextus Empiricus, he's kind of boring and it's high,
Very
it's high.
dry.
Yeah, so you have to find a way to amuse yourself while you are reading. So you have to interpret stuff, and you have to, have a certain mood to read Sextus Empiricus. Whereas Nietzsche is basically you read and it's just exciting, and you may not even understand what you're reading, but it certainly makes you feel,
Yeah, it's exciting.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
very yeah, it's he's a very entertaining philosopher for
yeah,
sure.
but the content it's almost this. So Beyond Good and Evil, it's all about skepticism. It's about okay, there's no good, there's no evil. It's all just how we see the world from different cultural. Like if you take different culture, like they evolve, they create a different view, and it's all just relative to your culture, to your particular time. But there's no absolute good and like today I was working on two sentences and in one of them uh, it was about this Plato's ideas like pure spirit and good in itself, and it's in the preface, and Nietzsche said like something like let us not be ungrateful to these dogmatic philosophies, but certainly like the most harm, the most terrible things on intellectual domain was caused by these like Plato's inventions of pure spirit and good in itself. And he tries to argue that again, it's not another kind of dogma, and it stopped us from developing real science, and we spent like thousands of years just being lost in fantasies.
Well, yeah, I mean, from one perspective, but it's not just Plato, right? I mean, Plato certainly was a key part of his philosophy. What is good, what is bad, but that's I mean, everybody did that. It wasn't just
Yeah, of
Plato,
course.
and religion actually did it in a much more aggressive way than philosophy, because Plato is trying to understand what is good, what is bad. He's trying to have this conversation, which is a conversation that I'm sure Nietzsche also had, especially coming from a Protestant background. But in religion, it's not even a conversation. In religion, it's just like you read this book and it will tell you what is good, it will tell you what is bad, and there's no dispute. And if there is dispute, well, not these days, but before, you might end up being burnt alive, so there really wasn't much room for discussion.
He actually calls Christianity like Platonism for masses.
It's in a way, yeah. It's if you knew McDonald's, it's like the McDonald's version of Platonism.
Yeah, something like that.
It's like mass production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. So
I like your topics for next, like artificial intelligence. There was something about artificial intelligence. I checked it out.
Yes.
And what was the other two? Let me
remember. I believe this week is universal basic income.
Yeah, universal basic income, actually, very exciting topic. I was thinking about it for since I found out what it was. I guess it was 2012. So I had like some arguments with people about it. Some of them believe that it's a good thing. Some of them say it's like stupid thing. Yeah, but it's very exciting topic. And I've read this essay I didn't say you before, which you sent me, Bertrand Russell, The Praise of Idleness.
What do you think about doing a meeting about that? Because I was kind of like thinking about it, and then I wasn't really sure if it was interesting enough to do a meeting on that. Just the essay, discussing the essay.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I
think it's interesting enough.
Yeah, I analyzed it. My stream, I guess it was in Leisure. Mm-hmm. So there was like, I was talking about it for 5 hours in a stream. I was reading this essay in a stream. So it was like 4th or 5th stream on Leisure. And then basically was
I love it. I love that essay, but I feel kind of guilty that I love it because it makes me feel like, I'm like this really like lazy dude, and I'm trying to convince people to be lazy. So I feel a little bit, I don't want to impose too much,
Yeah, I even wrote a kind of like a similar article in 2012 talking about like 3-hour work day. So Bertrand Russell says about like 4-hour work day.
4 hour, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like writing an article about 3-hour work, but I presented it in a kind
of. But it's also important to think that Bertrand Russell wrote this at a time when the work hours were not 8 hours like today. Like it was people were working about like 12 hours or something like that.
No, it was already 8 hours.
Already, you think?
Yeah, it was already 8 hours
really
in England. Yeah, it was. I guess they made 8 hours in the beginning of 19th century.
Okay.
Well, but there was like Bertrand Russell probably like remember times when it was.
For sure. It used to be like 16. It used to, and Bertrand Russell.
Not 16. 16, I guess it's like impossible. But 12.
No, it's not. It's not impossible. It was about 16 in a lot of places. I mean, people were really exploited. I mean, it wasn't a reasonable thing. That's why there were that kind of explains the rise of socialism. It wasn't really a 20th century. It became a political force in the 20th century, but really the intellectual groups and that all started in the 19th century, and it was people were exploited quite a bit in the 19th century.
Yeah, workers basically were like animals.
Yeah, they were worked like animals. So it really was. It was about 16 hours. There was no free time. It was and it was very mechanical work. So it was very hard life. People started having much better conditions of life in the 20th century, because really before that it wasn't people. The general masses didn't really have good conditions of life.
Yeah, but still, what Bertrand Russell wrote in this essay, now it's almost the same. Nothing changed. People believe that they have to work like 10, 12 hours a day, and they don't know if they have leisure. Even like. Yesterday we had a conversation at my speaking club, and we touched the topic of remote work, and some people were talking about, what's the difference between staying at home and working at home or going to some work. And some of them complained that they they don't know what, like, if they have work at home, they basically can differentiate between their work and their like the other time, and they work all the time and they don't know what to do like if they don't work. And I
Wow.
was and I was saying, like, studying languages or doing some art, whatever, and they, yeah, but in reality, it's like when you have free time, and if you got used to work, like when you
Yeah.
work, when you kind of brainwashed that you have to work every day,
All the time. Yeah.
yeah, all the time. It's very, you may even have kind of guilt if you don't
Yes,
work.
guilt is it's an important motivator for capitalism and for just working, like the working system, which is a fairly new system, because I've been studying some history, and it's a fairly new system. The new model of work.
Mhm.
Really, just it was developed in the 19th century. It didn't really exist before. It was different. But
Mhm.
this whole system of, they started coming up with factories, and then as a result of that, they started coming up with the idea of having wages and laborers that were worked on wages, schedules, time, like this organization of work, with the schedule of work, with the 8 hours, which didn't used to be 8 hours. It started at 16 or something like that, and then gradually was reduced to 8.
Yeah, and
But
then division of labor and
division
all.
of labor,
Yeah.
all of that is the structure that they came up with in the 19th century, which was allowed us to produce a lot more, certainly. So but the trade-off is that people, became goods, essentially, in a way. Or maybe not, that's not a word, but they became productive units, right? Every person became a productive unit, and you mechanized everything in some way. And transcendent, what's it called, transcendentalism or something like that. I forgot.
Transcendentalism.
Transcendentalism. Yeah. So that was a reaction to that.
Mhm.
It was the notion that people have lost agency in their lives. They've become just essentially, free
Cogs in the machine.
cogs in the machine, exactly. And
Yeah.
they've lost their agency in life. They're not free people anymore, and we need to come up with a way to react to this, and regain our agency, regain our freedom. So it's a very interesting topic, but it's also interesting when you study history and you understand that what were the processes that led to this.
Mhm. Yeah, I've tried to like I never studied, but I read some books. Like I read Marx's books, like Das Capital in
Mhm.
Russian translation. I guess I wanted to read 3 volumes, but I couldn't force myself to do. I read only like the first and half of the second volume of Das Capital. And Adam Smith, Ricardo. I also tried to read like political, like these philosophers, economists, but
Yeah.
it didn't find anything which I could like. I could. It was very hard for me to focus, like to read them, since it wasn't
Well, it's
something
very it's very boring stuff.
that I was interested in. But in Marx explains everything. It's like this way of looking at the world through social classes, this dichotomy between proletariat and bourgeoisie. Yeah, it's useful fairy tale to understand. Like
Yeah, I
this.
mean, it ultimately proved quite misguided, but he came from. I mean, he like I said, it was a reaction to something. It was a reaction to something.
Yeah, and then you think about these developments of states, like monarchy, aristocracy, polity or democracy, and how they change, and these different classes, like warriors and whatever, priests and peasants and workers. So
Hmm.
it's like yeah, it makes sense when you study history and you study simultaneously philosophy, economy, this production. There are some lectures. I remember I didn't read a lot, but there were some lectures related to this topic, and I guess one of my favorite English guy was Paul Wolf. It's like 100 years old guy, like very, very, very old. He kind of
Really?
Marxist. He's kind of Marxist, but he has very like kind of clear like explanations of. He studied Kant, like he dedicated his life to study Kant, Marx, Kant and Marx, I guess, but mostly Kant and Freud. And he was kind of socialist. He has lectures like on Marx, on Kant, and on Freud on the internet. There's like six or seven lectures to dedicated to each particular person. And I remember I watched them, and he helped me like understand to like this evolution of social structures and social classes, social distinctions, whatever. But when you what I've noticed, you may just be so inspired. You may watch a lecture or a course of lecture, and it's so inspiring. You understand everything so clearly. You may explain everything to anyone, but then after half a year, you just forget forget like 90% of it, and you can't even formulate what was there.
That's true.
When you're constantly exposed to new information, it's just kind of stream of consciousness. But it also, I've noticed it also helps a lot to understand all sorts of new informations. So whenever I study right now, it's like I process it kind of through the previous content which I uploaded to my headspace, whatever.
Yeah.
And now I can see like what I study, like there's so many examples, so many materials which are available to understand better anything what I study right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Political economy and different social, evolution of social classes. It may be exciting, but you need to prepare for it. For some lectures, like real watch probably something.
Yeah. Vladimir, I gotta go because I need to take care of my daughter. But it was really nice talking to you. I hope you enjoyed the discussion of the book as well, and we'll continue it. We'll continue next week. I do like this idea of having like reading these things.
Yeah, great.
It makes for
like it.
It's learning and fun.
Yeah.
Like propaganda for education.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, and thanks for watching, if anyone watched, and we'll be back next week. All right, and I'll see you on Friday, maybe, Vladimir, if you manage to wake up.
Yeah, I'll definitely try. Like this time, the third time I can't. Like 3 times in a row, I can't miss. I'll try even if I'll
It's okay if you can't do it, that's fine. We'll talk on Monday.
Universal basic income is certainly the topic which I'd like to participate talking about.
Yeah, universal basic income will be the topic of the conversation on Friday, this upcoming Friday, at 7 p.m. Central United States, and I mean I can't say it for every time zone, I guess, but yeah. It's Fridays we do the group talk, the philosophy club talk. So thanks for watching, guys, and